All right, welcome to another deep dive where we take a big pile of sources and try to wrestle out the main ideas.
Yeah, just for you.
Just for you listening at home or in the car or wherever you are.
Soaking it all in.
Yeah, so today we are going deep on a Hegel,
Big one.
a huge one.
Yeah.
But we're looking at Hegel as seen by Charles Taylor.
Through the lens.
Through the lens of Taylor.
Yeah.
We're after, Hegel is a big thinker, lots of ideas.
Where do you even begin?
Right, but we are kind of zeroing in on the development of the modern individual.
The modern subject.
Yeah, the modern subject.
And also this concept of Geist,
Oh, yeah, Geist.
which is spirit, often translated as spirit.
But it's a tricky idea, so we're going to try to unpack that.
Tricky.
But it's important to remember that Taylor's not just, pulling this out of thin air.
No, he's drawing on a lot of sources and, thinkers that came before Hegel.
Right.
So he's looking at Kant and Fichte and Schelling and Spinoza.
I was going to say, those are some of the biggest names.
Yeah, big hitters.
Yeah. In the history of philosophy.
Uh-huh.
And then, not just that, but he's also really, keyed into the historical
The context.
and the religious changes that were happening that really shaped their philosophies.
Yeah, can't take those out of the equation.
Yeah, you can't just think about these guys like in a vacuum.
Right, right.
So our mission for you listening is to try to make Hegel make sense.
Distill it down to
Distill it down
its essential.
to the essentials.
Yeah.
And we're going to be looking at, as seen by Taylor, Hegel's ideas about what it means to be a subject,
Subjectivity.
what freedom really is.
Big one.
A big one.
Yeah.
And then the nature of reality itself.
Yeah.
We're not messing around here.
No. This is the whole shebang.
This is the whole shebang, but we want to make sure that while we're giving you the whole shebang,
It's digestible.
it's digestible and that you're not going to feel like you're lost
Lost at sea.
in this sea of philosophical jargon. We're going to try to make those aha moments come through.
Yeah, light bulbs going off.
Yeah, make those light bulbs go off.
Yeah.
All right, so let's dive right in.
Let's do it.
So first of all, we got to talk about, Taylor talks about this huge shift
And how we even conceive of.
in how we even think about what a subject is.
Right. The subject, that is the I that's thinking, that's experiencing the world.
The I at the center of our experience.
Yeah. So Taylor contrasts kind of the pre-modern view of the subject.
And he talks about Aristotle as
Aristotle's the exemplar here, the key figure.
like the main
Yeah, the pre-modern view.
pre-modern view.
The view of the universe was that it had meaning built in,
It was a meaningful...
a natural order.
Yeah, it wasn't just like a random collection of stuff.
Yeah, it all fit together.
It had
And people used to talk about what they called final causes.
so everything had a purpose.
It had a purpose. So it's like the purpose of the acorn is to become an oak tree.
Right, so it's like there's almost like a blueprint
Yeah, it's all laid out.
that's laid out and everything kind of has its place.
Right, and we participate in that order in some way.
Right. So this is the pre-modern view.
Yeah.
Then Taylor talks about this big turning point, which is the 17th century.
17th century, epistemological revolution, big word.
A big word.
But basically, people started rejecting this idea.
A blueprint.
Yeah, that we're just kind of projecting
Our own.
our own meaning and desires onto the world.
Onto the world.
And they said, no, we got to look at the world empirically
We got to look at the world as it is
and try to really see what's there without imposing our own category.
without just projecting meaning onto it.
Yeah, so instead of saying, well, the acorn falls because it's meant to become an oak tree,
Right.
they're like, no, acorns fall. We can figure out the mechanics of that.
We can figure out like the gravity and the physics of it.
The gravity, the wind,
The
whatever.
wind, yeah.
But we don't need to assume some kind of inherent purpose in the acorn itself. Right. So we can just look at the acorn as an acorn and not as like a potential oak tree.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a big shift.
A huge shift.
Yeah.
And so from this shift
This new way of seeing the world.
in how we see the world, we get a new kind of subject.
A new way of being a subject.
Yeah.
Yeah, one that doesn't define itself by its place in a pre-existing order.
Right, because now there's not a pre-existing order.
That's gone.
So how do you even know who you are
So now the individual starts to define itself
by itself?
by itself.
Yeah, and that's a huge, huge change.
Huge break from tradition.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting for you listening.
This is where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah, because think about it. If you're not defining yourself by some kind of cosmic rule book,
Right.
what does that do to our idea of freedom?
Yeah, I mean, it just brings in this whole new notion of what it even means to be free.
Yeah.
Like now freedom becomes this possibility of self-determination.
Instead of fulfilling a set role. Right, right. I'm not just, you know, playing my part in the divine drama.
Right.
Like I have the possibility of deciding who I am, what I want to be.
And that's like an irreversible change, according to Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, this notion of freedom, it seems to be, here to stay in the modern world.
Yeah, that genie's not going back in the bottle.
No, no.
Okay, so this new sense of self, obviously, is not just going to stay
Tucked away in
the philosophy books.
the ivory tower.
Yeah, so how did this new sense of self actually play out in the real world?
Yeah, so it had this really profound impact on European society and beyond spread globally.
Wow.
And of course, political and economic and social changes are all feeding into this.
Of course.
But in Europe, Taylor, he singles out this other really important factor,
Which is?
the Protestant Reformation.
Oh, okay.
And particularly Calvin. Yeah, Calvin and his followers.
Now, that might seem kind of counterintuitive.
It's not the first thing you think of when you're like, oh, the modern individual.
Right, because Calvin's all about,
Predestination, God's will.
God's will, yeah.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
Okay.
What Calvinism did was really challenge the traditional Catholic understanding of the sacred.
Oh, okay.
So, Catholicism had all these specific places, times, rituals.
Right, where the divine was like present.
Where the divine was especially present.
Yeah.
But Calvin and his followers, they were all about desacralizing the world.
Stripping away the magic.
Yeah, stripping away that mediating layer.
Yeah.
And emphasizing an absolute and direct relationship with God.
So no more saints, no more relics, no more
need for all that.
Yeah.
You're going straight to the source.
Right, like a direct line
Direct line to God.
to God.
So their goal, it wasn't to create self-reliant individuals.
Right.
They wanted believers to be totally dependent on God's will.
Oh, yeah.
But there's this unintended consequence.
Oh,
So over time, as religious fervor in its kind of initial intensity started to wane.
people started to lose their religion a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
This desacralized worldview, it created the perfect conditions
I know.
for self-defining subjectivity.
Oh, that's so interesting. So it's like a byproduct.
A byproduct of this movement that had a totally different aim.
But it ends up shaping,
The modern world, in a way.
yeah, how we think of ourselves.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So that's how we get to this kind of self-defining subject.
So we have the self-defining individual emerging.
Yeah.
What's next in Taylor's kind of take on Hegel?
So next he looks at
This is going to blow your mind, folks.
this theory of self-realization and expression.
Expression.
Yeah, so it's not just about acknowledging that, people are different.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody's got their quirks.
We've always known that.
Yeah.
The real shift here is the idea that these differences,
Yeah.
they're not just like accidental.
Right. They're not just like, oh, you happen to be taller. You happen to be.
They actually define a unique path for you.
Oh, interesting.
Like a specific form that you as an individual,
You're made
you're called on to realize.
realize.
So they're not just differences. They actually become like morally important.
They take on this weight.
Yeah, like they're essential to living a good life.
So it's not just like, I happen to be different. It's like,
This is my unique way of being, and I need to actualize it.
I'm meant to be this way.
Yeah.
Interesting. So we're talking about human life.
Yeah, and this leads to this idea of human life as a form of expression.
Expression. So it's like, life is art.
In a way, yeah, and Taylor calls this expression theory.
Expression theory.
And this is really important because it challenges a typical Enlightenment view.
Which is?
Well, the Enlightenment tended to put up a big wall between meaning and being.
Meaning and being. Okay.
Yeah, but expression theory says, no, for human existence at least, our lives aren't just these, biological facts.
It's not just like, here's your DNA.
It's not just DNA. It's this meaningful unfolding of an idea.
So our lives have meaning.
Yeah, they're the realization of an idea.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're getting deep into
The nature of being.
nature of being.
Yeah.
But Taylor also mentions this criticism of the Enlightenment that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. He talks about this false world of representation.
What does that mean?
So the idea here is that sometimes the Enlightenment,
Okay, so how does freedom fit into all this? Because it seems like
Oh,
freedom
it becomes crucial.
becomes really important for this idea
For
of...
self-realization, yeah. So
Okay.
freedom isn't just one good among many.
Right.
It's almost synonymous with self-realization.
It's like the foundation.
It's the condition for realizing this unique form that you are meant to embody.
Yeah. And that also kind of changes how we think about our relationship with nature.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, the Enlightenment was all about, like,
This objective sense.
objectively studying nature.
Nature's out there. It's an object.
And we're over here manipulating it.
Yeah,
Literally.
detached.
Yeah.
But this idea of expression,
Okay.
it fuels this longing for unity with nature.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, a sense of belonging to something bigger.
Okay.
And so it's a direct contrast to that kind of cold and objectified view of the Enlightenment.
Which can feel alienating.
Yeah, a lot of people experience that as like an exile from the natural world.
So we're not just like a mind stuck in a vat observing
Oh, no.
observing this
We're part of it.
dead world.
Yeah, the subject is increasingly seen as this vital force, like this integral part of nature.
So nature is not just something outside of us.
No, it's in us. We're in it.
Yeah.
It's this kind of living, breathing reality.
And then Taylor brings in Kant,
The big kid.
big K. So what was Kant's contribution to all this?
So Kant's contribution is absolutely massive. He makes this really groundbreaking argument.
Which is
It's called the transcendental argument.
transcendental argument, okay?
So he's trying to figure out what must be true
Okay.
for our experience of the world to even be possible.
So it's like the preconditions for experience?
Yeah, the necessary conditions.
Okay.
So he shows that the subject of experience
That makes
has
more
to be a unified,
I think.
that I can think, that can accompany all my representation,
All my experiences.
all my experiences. And he also shows that these necessary connections,
But cause and effect?
cause and effect, substance,
Substance and accident.
all these categories that our minds use to organize experience,
Yeah.
he shows that those are actually indispensable to the way we experience the world.
Yeah, like our minds are actively structuring our experience.
Exactly. So it's not just like we're passively receiving data.
It's like we're putting on these colored glasses.
Yeah, like we're organizing it through these categories.
Yeah, okay, so that was huge.
Yeah, that was a huge
But
break.
there's always a... But with Kant,
Okay.
he insisted on this really strict distinction
Makes sense.
between phenomena, so that's the world as we experience it,
The world with the glasses on.
the world with the glasses on,
Okay.
and things in themselves.
Things in themselves, like the raw world.
The raw, unfiltered world,
Yeah.
independent of our minds.
Okay.
And he says, we can never know for sure if the way we experience the world
Okay.
actually corresponds to the way things are in themselves.
So it's like we can never take the glasses off. We can't take the glasses off. We're stuck with them.
We're stuck with the phenomena.
Yeah. So that's kind of a limit.
Yeah, it's a pretty big limit.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, and then Kant also, in his second big work, talks about moral freedom.
Yes. The second critique, the critique of practical reason.
And there he argues that morality,
Oh, it has to be totally separate from happiness.
so it can't be about pleasure or...
No, it's not about, seeking pleasure or avoiding pain.
It's about something else.
It's about duty.
Duty.
Yeah, so a true moral command, he calls it a categorical imperative.
Categorical imperative.
It binds you unconditionally,
Just because...
just because you're a rational being with a will.
And this is where we get that famous act in such a way that you could will that your maxim should
Become a universal law.
become a universal law, right?
Yeah, and this moral law, it has to be a priori,
Meaning,
meaning it doesn't depend on any particular desires or outcomes.
it's not about the consequences.
No, it's purely formal.
Purely formal.
Okay. So a law that's formally necessary, that's what truly binds a rational will.
Okay, so it's like the contradiction of that law is unthinkable.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what makes it binding.
So that's Kant's idea.
But of course, there's always a problem or a question that comes up.
Yeah, people have been debating for centuries whether this purely formal law
Okay.
can actually give us guidance in real-world situations.
Right, because it's so abstract.
So abstract, like how do I know what to do in this particular case?
Oh,
So that's been an ongoing debate, but Taylor points out
okay.
there's this really exciting kernel in Kant's philosophy,
Which is
this idea of radical freedom.
radical freedom. So even though the categorical imperative may be difficult to apply.
Yeah, even though it's hard to figure out, the
Yeah.
very idea that we can choose
Okay.
to be governed by this purely formal law
Yeah.
that our reason dictates
Yeah.
means that we're declaring our independence from nature.
We're breaking free.
Yeah, from all those natural inclinations.
Desires.
Desires, the laws that govern those.
So we're not just determined.
No, we're not just products of our biology or our environment.
We're something more.
We're something more. We're free in a transcendental sense.
So that's Kant's big, really important contribution.
Yeah, I mean, he gives us this incredibly powerful idea of freedom.
But he keeps that separation.
That strict separation.
Between our experience.
And the things in themselves.
So then the philosophers that came after him, like Fichte and Schelling.
Yeah, they're trying to work through that.
They're trying to figure out, like, how do we bridge this gap?
How do we overcome this Kantian dualism?
Yeah, so
they're looking for what Taylor calls an ontological foundation.
Ontological foundation.
For unity of freedom and expression.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're really inspired by Schiller.
Oh, yeah, I remember Taylor talks about Schiller.
Schiller sees this gradual progress towards realized humanity,
Okay.
but he feels like it's lacking this grounding.
This foundation.
Yeah, like it's just kind of floating out there.
Yeah.
So Fichte tries to provide that grounding.
Oh, okay, so Fichte steps in.
He says, look, if we want our moral freedom
Yeah.
to really harmonize with our being
Yeah.
as natural creatures,
Okay.
then nature itself must have some tendency towards the spiritual.
So nature can't just be dead matter.
No, it has to have some kind of like inherent drive
Towards spirit.
towards spirit, yeah.
Wow.
So he's going beyond Kant.
Okay.
He's saying we can't just see nature as this object of our experience.
You have to be more than that.
It has to have this inner principle.
Okay, so Fichte is kind of pointing towards this idea
Yeah, he's hinting at it.
of a cosmic subject.
Yeah, like a universal consciousness that's driving everything.
That's cool.
Yeah, but even Fichte is still focusing primarily on human beings.
On our moral vocation.
Yeah, like our moral duty.
Okay.
He doesn't quite get to this full-blown idea of a cosmic subject.
Okay, and then Schelling comes along.
Schelling takes it a step further.
Yeah.
So he's drawing on this Renaissance idea of humanity as a microcosm.
Like a little mirror of
a little mirror of the universe.
Yeah.
And he says, look, the creative force in nature
Yeah.
and the creative power of thought, they're fundamentally one and the same.
So there's this deep unity
Yeah, a unity of the creative principle.
that runs through everything.
Yeah, and this is where we get those ideas that Taylor highlights.
From Goethe to the Romantics.
From Goethe to the Romantics to Hegel.
And ultimately to Hegel, yeah.
This notion that we can really know nature.
Not just by studying it.
Not just by dissecting it,
but
by feeling it.
by experiencing it.
By connecting with it.
Through this shared substance.
Yeah, a kind of communion with nature.
Communion with nature.
So that's the kind of background that leads us to Hegel's
Geist.
big, complicated idea of Geist.
So how did Hegel bring all these ideas together in his concept of Geist?
Okay, so Hegel's Geist, sometimes translated as spirit.
Spirit, yeah.
Sometimes people equate it with God,
Okay.
but it's not the traditional God.
Okay.
It's not a God that could exist without us.
Oh, interesting.
Geist is the spirit that lives as spirit.
Through us.
Through us.
So we're essential to Geist.
We're the vehicles, yeah, for its existence and its self-expression.
Wow, so we're not just like...
Passive bystanders.
Yeah, or like creations of Geist. We're like...
We're participants.
We're participants in Geist.
Yeah, we're necessary for it to be what it is.
That's cool.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Geist isn't just the sum total of all our individual spirits.
It's bigger than that.
It's bigger than that. It's the underlying spiritual reality of the whole universe.
It's like the cosmic consciousness.
Yeah, like a cosmic consciousness with its own purposes.
That extend beyond our own little...
Our little finite concerns.
Yeah.
So for Hegel, the way we really understand ourselves
Okay.
is by seeing ourselves as participants in this larger spirit.
We're part of something much bigger.
Yeah, and that's where real meaning comes from.
Okay, so we're all part of something bigger.
Yeah.
Something that's rational, something that's moving towards a purpose.
That's the Hegelian vision.
That's the Hegelian vision.
Yeah.
So now Taylor talks about this interplay between unity and separation.
Oh, yeah, that's a key theme in Hegel.
So what's going on there?
So early on in his thinking,
Okay.
Hegel was really searching for what he called a regenerate religion.
Regenerate religion.
Yeah, one that could unite reason and feeling.
And action.
And action, yeah.
Okay.
Like he felt that true spiritual existence,
Okay.
it couldn't just be about intellectual doctrines.
It couldn't just be about believing the right things.
No, it had to involve the whole person.
Yeah, it had to be lived.
It had to be lived, yeah.
And then he also had this evolving perspective on Christianity.
Yeah, he goes through some changes there.
Taylor talks about how, Hegel's view of Christianity's supposed failure
Yeah, like how to interpret that.
changed over time.
Yeah, so in his early writings, especially this work, The Spirit of Christianity, he moves away from the traditional interpretation of Jesus,
Right.
like being forced into this role of the Messiah,
Okay.
and he emphasizes this kind of retreat.
Retreat.
Yeah, an inward turning.
Oh, okay.
And this is connected to his developing critique of Kant.
Okay.
So he sees this tension
Okay.
between Kant's ideal of radical moral autonomy
Okay.
and this deep human yearning for unity with the world.
Okay.
So he sees Jesus
Okay.
as embodying a kind of wholeness,
Okay.
a unity of moral response
Okay.
that goes beyond Kant's separation.
Yeah, of like duty and inclination.
Right. Like in Kant, you're supposed to do your duty,
Regardless of.
regardless of how you feel.
Yeah.
But Hegel sees Jesus as embodying something more integrated.
A more holistic.
Yeah, a more holistic, more lived morality.
Yeah. So it's like this ideal that's like actually attainable.
Yeah, something we can aspire to.
Not just this abstract.
Cold, abstract duty.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So.
But then Hegel's own philosophy develops.
It evolved.
Yeah, he comes to believe that this separation,
This training, right?
yeah, this trending, this division that he sees in Judeo-Christianity,
Okay.
he actually thinks it's a necessary stage.
Oh, so it's not a bad thing.
No, it's part of the process.
Part of the process.
Yeah, so he's not trying to just recapture the supposed unity of ancient Greece.
Right. It's not about going backwards.
No, it's about synthesizing
Synthesized
ancient unity
with modern,
the achievements of the modern age. So we're talking
like
about
the freedom of autonomous spirit
that the Enlightenment brought.
that the Enlightenment brought. Yeah.
Okay, so it's like a higher level synthesis.
It's not just going back, it's going forward.
Going forward, incorporating what we've learned.
Yeah. So Hegel was not a nostalgic thinker.
No, he's not trying to go back to some golden age.
No, he's trying to create a new golden age.
A new golden age.
That incorporates the best of both worlds.
Okay, this is where we get to this really important idea.
Of self-positing spirit. Self-positing spirit? That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it's a mouthful, but it's central to his mature philosophy.
Okay, so what's going on with this self-positing spirit?
Okay, so this is how Hegel tries to resolve this tension
Okay.
between, on the one hand, the longing for unity with nature,
Okay.
which was really prevalent in his time.
Yeah, the Romantics were all about that.
Yeah, the Romantics, but also thinkers like Schelling.
Okay.
And then on the other hand, this emphasis on radical moral autonomy.
Which we see in Kant, Fichte.
Kant, Fichte. Yeah.
Okay, so he's trying to bring those two together.
Yeah, like how do you square those two seemingly contradictory impulses?
Right, because one's about like merging with something bigger,
Yeah, dissolving the self.
and the other's about like asserting the self.
Yeah, like I am a free, independent agent.
So how does self-positing spirit help with this?
Okay, so here's the thing.
Okay.
The separation between mind and world,
Okay.
which happens when we become self-conscious.
When we realize that we're separate from the world.
Yeah, that we're not just part of the flow.
Yeah.
That separation inevitably creates a sense of opposition.
Like me versus the world.
Yeah, like it's us and them, host